Voiceover Social.
Hello, 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 hello.
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 What are you doing?
Hello. It's us. It's here. It's us again. Thank you again for tuning in and listening to our podcast.
I don't get the option.
Well, there is that. I'm not really talking to you at this point.
Oh, okay. There's just the two of us in the room, that's all.
I know, but you're behind a blanket, so I can't see you, so it's all good. You all right?
Yes, I am. I am all right. It's nearly the weekend, and I'm convincing myself that the next few hours are going to be fine.
When this comes out, it'll be a Tuesday, so...
Yeah, but people aren't going to always listen to it on a Tuesday. They might be listening to it on a Friday afternoon.
Well, that is very true.
Happy weekend!
Hooray! So, a little update on things coming in future episodes of the podcast. And also a quick reminder again to save the date for January the 25th of the Great Big Voiceover Social. We are still working behind the scenes to get everything in place to let you know a bit more about that, but we don't have anything firmed up just yet.
No further updates on that this month, but watch this space.
A constant reminder to save the date. And we're also talking to a few different people that we've got coming on for guests. Two people that we can tell you about who will be on next month's podcast is Jamie Muffett and Karen Gilfrey. Both are incredibly well-known people, members of the voiceover community. They are not only working voiceovers themselves, they are both actively involved in supporting the industry with conferences or with NAVA and with their own podcast. So that's going to be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to chatting to them.
Yes.
But what we should probably talk about is this month's podcast because,
that would be sensible.
Yes, sensible. So we've got two people that I am so excited about being able to chat to on this month's podcast. Both me and Rob know them and have known them, but Rob has been working with both of them for a long time. So, Rob, would you like to do the intro this month?
Yeah. It was such a fun interview to do. I'm really, really excited that you're going to get to hear it now. We're talking to two absolute stars and veterans of the voiceover industry. We're talking to Paul Brown and Emma Clarke. I used to work with both of them back in the day when I was working at a production studio, and the sessions with them were always so much fun. And then since we have been kind of working self-employed and running BEE, they have both become clients of ours as well, which is always really, really nice.
They have. And some people will, of course, know Brown from the Voiceover Social in Manchester.
Yes, and he was on an earlier episode of this podcast as well.
Yes, he was. And actually, if you look at the kind of work that the both of them have done, you will have heard their voice over and over and over and over again, and probably never knew it. So they are both spectacular voiceovers. They are wonderful human beings, and yes, very, very happy to have them on our podcast.
Yeah, and I love the conversation that we had with them. We started off asking them about their wealth of experience, and even though I've been working in the industry for over 20 years, I learned things about how the way they used to work back in the day when they were starting off.
And how young they were.
And then we go on and they give us words of wisdom and their insight into the way they think that the voiceover industry is going. So it's I love this interview. I think it's really good.
It was a lot of fun chatting to them, and two fabulous people.
So now we've built it up far too much. I think we should have a listen.
Let's do that.
Emma and Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
I could tell you a lot about Emma.
Yeah, not each other. That's the wrong way around.
Oh, all right.
I might make for a more entertaining podcast.
Emma, I'll let you speak about yourself.
No, I'm intrigued now.
No, because it would never make the cut.
Well, I've been a pro voice for about 300 years now. And you'll have heard me on all sorts of commercials and videos and telephony stuff and e-learning. And it's like that thing where, you know how people say that you're never more than 10 feet away from a rat? Well, it's a bit like that with my voice. Do you know what I mean? You phone somewhere and, oh, God, it's press 3 for account. So, yeah, I've done a broad range of types of work for a broad range of clients and different kinds of media. So I'm really lucky that I've kind of worked in different sectors and that I've had a job, really. I just feel so grateful. that it's lasted.
Yeah, I can't help feeling that I've got away with it for an awful long while. It's like 1978 was my first effort. And the thing that I found interesting is that then the only option you had was to do radio commercials.
Yes.
And I thought that's what being a voiceover was. You had radio commercials to do because that's what there was. There wasn't any internet. There weren't any mobile phones. There's no digital content of any sort. You either go and do some drama for the BBC or maybe a very dull corporate for British Steel. Otherwise, it's all radio ads. And that was it pretty much like that for you?
Yeah, definitely. That's it, in the commercial world. Yeah, I mean, I started off doing stuff for the BBC when I was a child, really. I was doing some quite highbrow poetry and prose reading stuff. And I did lots of light entertainment as well. But as a commercial voice, it was, I would say, I mean, over 90% of what I did was radio.
Yeah.
Without a
absolutely.
doubt. I mean, yeah, there was occasional corporates, but it was radio and telly, bits of telly. But radio was definitely the bulk of what I recorded.
And you had to go to the radio station.
In person.
You couldn't sit in your bath or anything like that. You had to go to the radio station.
I mean, for acoustic reasons, I don't recommend sitting in baths anyway, but I get your point.
Health and safety, mate. Forget the acoustics.
Oh, I mean, I wasn't imagining a full bath. So how did you both get into voicing?
Well, I started with the BBC, really. I wrote to BBC North. I was 15 and I just said, I really like doing voice stuff. Can I come and read for you? And they said yes, which was astonishing.
That's amazing.
I rocked up with 6 very different pieces, poetry, prose, some crazy comedy stuff, some very surreal stuff as well, just to show what I could do. And pretty much straight after, I started getting work in the drama department. And I worked with Alfred Bradley, who was this phenomenal producer, reading poetry for Radio 4. And that was brilliant, really brilliant. And then my dad said, did you know there's a studio in Sale that makes radio commercials? Why don't you go and see them? So that was Alpha Sound. So I did, and I went and did a voice test, and I was shockingly bad. Because the way you have to be as a voiceover, the voiceover delivery, and certainly for radio commercials, and certainly for radio commercials in the early 90s, it was a very different style of vocal delivery than the kind of method acting that I'd been using with the BBC. It was a totally different ballgame. So Steve England, the guy there, said, well, go away and practice. Well, first of all, he said, go away. Okay. But he said, go away and practice. And I did, because I was determined to learn this skill. I didn't want it to get the better of me. So I'm a sad nerd. You will probably know this about me, but I recorded the radio and I transcribed the commercials and practiced and learnt the vocal tropes. I learned the inflections. I learned how to deal with price product. I learned how to do with different kinds of commercials. And I did that for 2 years. I was relentless. And then I went back and did another voice test, which was marginally better. And they said, well, let's try you out. And it sort of developed from there, really. It's very much a word of mouth business, this, in my experience, that you develop a relationship with a producer. They know that you can deliver, you can sight read, because it was all sight reading. You know, there was no, I mean, I don't think there is still. I don't really get an opportunity to practice scripts even still. They know that you can do it and they know that you're reliable. And then it just sort of grew. And then that's how all these decades have passed, basically.
You see, you managed to do that through commitment and determination. I did it to try and get off school.
I love it. I love the honesty.
Well, yeah, we had sort of Thursday afternoons we were allowed to go and do something called community service. And our hospital radio station needed volunteers. So I went and volunteered, simply to get out of school. And that's how I got the bug.
How old were you then when you started doing
I was 15, same as Emma's start. Yeah. I loved the letter I got from when I left school and before I went to uni. I did a lot of work experience at our local radio station. And to try and get in there, I sent a letter to the managing director, and he wrote back. I always thought he was a very pompous man. And my suspicions were completely confirmed when I got the reply from him, because he said something to the effect of, we do not have the financial fat to take on a human supercargo. That was his way of saying bugger off.
So, just kind of going back, I mean, Emma's kind of half answered this already, but, you know, these days there's all sorts of different training organisations and vocal coaches and all sorts of assistants that you can buy as a voiceover and budding voiceover. I'm going to presume that back then when you guys were starting, none of that kind of support existed. So how did you go about learning how to be a voiceover? How did you go about putting your studio together? Did you put a studio together? How did you kind of tackle that side of things?
Well, there's several answers to that from me. First of all, yes, I've never had a lesson in voicing in my life because such things didn't exist. So it has to be self-taught, and you do it by listening, you do it by copying, you do it by interrogating others who are doing it and living on your wits, really, because there was no other way of doing it. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. The other thing is, as far as putting a studio together, there was no point at that point because you couldn't connect with anybody because there wasn't any ISDN, there wasn't any internet. There was no point in having your own studio, so you just simply went out to studios all day. So, for example, when I left uni, I'm sure Emma will be in much the same situation. You try and do 2 or 3 sessions a day. So I started off being based in Leeds. Maybe you'd do Leeds in the morning, you might do Bradford in the afternoon or lunchtime, and you might do Sheffield in the afternoon and then go home. And the next day you might do Coventry, Birmingham and Wolverhampton, going from one radio station to another. So it was equally about spending time in other people's studios and in traffic jams on the motorway.
Yeah, it really was.
I can imagine the mileage.
Oh, yeah, 60,000 miles a year was not a problem.
Easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
So when do you think that started to shift in terms of, I mean, did you spot it as a kind of gentle transition or did it just sort of overnight?
Yeah, I think that the issue is that there were quite a few things that all happened that made the voiceover world change. In the first place, there was the introduction of ISDN, which meant that you no longer had to travel around the country. You could simply sit at home. The problem with that, it saved tens of thousands of miles. But before ISDN, you were always guaranteed a minimum fee or a minimum number of scripts to go to a radio station to voice. So you might get a minimum of 12 radio scripts at this station, and you might end up easily doing 36 ads a day. Now, with ISDN, as soon as that comes in, well, they don't need to do that anymore. They need to give you just one script because they can specify a voice for every script and just book you for that one script. So you might do 10 sessions a day, but you also might only do 10 scripts rather than 36. So the introduction of ISDN certainly made life a lot easier, but it didn't necessarily make it more profitable. And a lot of people who weren't prepared to travel around the country, but who were prepared to overcome the financial barrier of buying the ISDN equipment, could then introduce themselves to the industry. And then as time goes on and the internet allows us to do all sorts of stuff for audio that we would never have been able to do before, or gaming or whatever, suddenly the barriers to entry, which had previously allowed very few people to get in on the industry, the financial barriers to entry disappeared. You didn't have to have an ISDN codec, and suddenly everyone is a voiceover. And also, I don't know what you think about this, Emma, there was a point, and I can't quite name the day, when RP was not a requirement to do ads at all. So everybody, even people from Birmingham, oh God, I said that out loud, could become voiceovers. And suddenly although there's a lot more voice work to be done, there are also 100 times more voiceovers looking for that work. So there's lots more work, fewer barriers to entry, and all this slides in, and I'm not sure exactly when it started. Yeah. But I think it's probably when ISDN came along. I would imagine it was the beginning of it, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that totally. I mean, when I first started, the skill set that you had to have as well at the very beginning, when I first got into this industry, you'd rock up to a radio station, you'd know that you'd have to be on the road again within an hour to get to your next booking. So if you had 15 scripts to record in that hour, you had to get them all done. So it was bish, bash, bosh. A lot of it was live mixed with the jingle. and music. So you had to be really on your game. Yeah. So you were living by the seat of your pants the whole time because you were under so much time pressure. You'd get there, you'd say your hellos, you'd make friends with everybody, you'd get in the booth and you'd do your stuff. And often they'd say, oh, while you're here, can you do this? And you'd be thinking, yeah, I really want to, but I've got to be in Hull.
The master of efficiency was actually the guy who encouraged me to do the job full time. Because while I was at uni, I was doing some work at a nearby radio station, which was then called Radio Tees. And the producer there said to me, what are you going to do for a job after you leave university? I said, I don't know, maybe become an accountant, perhaps. And he said, well, why don't you voice? And I said, is that a job?
Yeah,
said,
I didn't think it was a job.
There were so few people doing it. And he said, oh, well, let me ask someone who does it on a regular basis and see what he says. I'll play you his stuff. And it was Mike Hurley.
Wow.
Now, Mike Hurley was the master of getting in, doing it and going. He was known as Go Home Early with One Take Hurley.
Yeah, he was
because he would go into a voice session and bish bash, but everything would get done in a take and it'd be off. Yeah. Blood pressure high and all. But he was the absolute master of getting things done quickly, was he not?
Yeah, he was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I remember a memorable session I did with him at Radio Air, and it was the first time I met him. I'd heard of him. You know, he had this legendary, almost mythical status in the industry. And then I met him and he was this big guy in an army combat jacket, and a big beard and moustache and hair. And he was just a sweetheart with me. And he actually introduced me to my agent in London. And I'm still with her now. And if Hurley hadn't been that generous with me, then I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
When I voice voiceovers, I mean, not that I'm doing much voicing these days, but when I encounter audio recorded by voiceovers who used to work in the pre-ISDN days and voices who used to voice to tape rather than digitally, the waveform of their voice looks completely different to anyone who's come into the industry in the last, let's say, 10 years, in that the waveform looks like it's already been compressed a lot. And the way that they breathe is a very, very different way of breathing to voiceovers who haven't been in the industry as long. There were undoubtedly different skills that you learned back in the day when you were starting out than need to be taught these days. So how much of this kind of change in waveform appearance do you think is down to that technique, and how much is just due to longevity of how long you've been voicing?
I think it's mic technique, and I think it's breathing techniques, because a lot of the time when we were on the road recording bish bash bosh, millions of scripts in one little session, then we'd have to get back on the road, your breath control had to be absolutely on point, especially if you were reading a really overwritten script and you had to get it done within 1 or 2 takes because you had to be back on the M62 again. So I think the breath control and the microphone technique, working around the mic, the proximity and the angle to the mic, and just knowing your own voice. And I think this is one of the things that took me a long time to become basically competent at, knowing my own voice and knowing how to work the mic, knowing just the effects I could have on the mic, working across, and it's very, very subtle, but I think it's mic technique and breathing.
I think one of the things that's very important at that stage, when we were in the early days of ILR, everything was live mixed, and the chances are you were voicing on a music bed or a donut jingle, so you got a gap to fill. And you couldn't stop and start because it was a live mix. So it had to be done in one. There had to be no errors, and you had to fit exactly within that donut.
Within a tenth of a second, the internal.
So
stopwatch.
that was really good training. As Emma says, it gives you much better breath control because you've got that. It's like you've got a laser beam on that 25.3 seconds that you've got to fill, and you've got to get it in one. Otherwise, you can't just drop in an edit. You have to do the whole damn thing again. There's no dropping in a line. There's no multi-track. You've got if the slightest error, you've got to do the whole commercial again and again and again till you get it right.
There was nowhere to hide, basically.
Absolutely nowhere. No. So you had to get it right as soon as you possibly could, and there's nothing more motivating than trying to avoid rush hour on the M62. So the trick is to get it done right first time as far as possible. And because you're doing lots of it over and over again all week, you do get a lot of practice and you become good at it. And I think that's probably a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the repetition of technique acquisition, because you're in the thick of it. Like I say, there's nowhere to hide. You've got to deliver that script. You inevitably build up techniques and skills over time just through a lot of practice. A lot of practice.
I remember from my days as a producer, when the voices used to come in, it was nice for us as a producer to see the voice as well, because we had been talking to people down the line and we got on okay with them. And then they came in and you saw how tall or short they were. It was a bit like meeting someone after you've done Zoom sessions and things. But the voices were, very, very often expressed how nice it was to be able to get out of the studio and actually see people. And because I'm talking still 20 years ago, the memories of driving up and down the motorway and seeing people like that were still very fresh for that generation of voiceovers, if I can put things like that, and makes us all sound very, very old. But yeah, the in-person session was always, and I'm sure still is always, a very welcome part of a voiceover's day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think one of the most underrated skills that a voiceover needs actually is to be able to create that relationship with a producer. And it's quite an intimate relationship, actually, with the producer, because they see the underbelly of everything that you do. They see the mistakes that you make. They see how you approach the whole session, who you really are. And I think that creating that relationship and nurturing that relationship and being totally genuine is such a huge part of the job. And I think that that's completely overlooked.
Yeah, I was saying this to someone a few weeks ago. When you get booked for doing an online session now for a radio ad, and you've got a 15-minute slot, so it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and you get the thing done in 2 or 3 minutes flat because it's very straightforward read. You say, thank you very much, goodbye. No, you've got another 10 minutes there to cement a relationship.
Exactly.
And find out what you've got in common. How's your bumper spots? What did you do at the weekend? All that sort of thing. And that's the way of creating, because you get repeat business out of a relationship. And that's really important. I mean, it's so much easier to get more business from an existing relationship rather than find a new client.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
So rather than saying, oh, that was easy, one take, goodbye, use the time to develop a relationship. And I think that's really, really important. Easier when you're face to face, but still important, even if more difficult, when you're online.
Yeah, exactly. And also listen. Don't use that space to talk about you and what you do and your CV and who you work for and all the funny voices you can do. Lose that. Create that almost intimate relationship with that producer, because over my career, I've built some amazing relationships with producers who are really good friends of mine, even though we don't see each other terribly often now. But they share stuff about their lives. Some really personal stuff, and often the voiceover is privy to quite a lot of very sensitive information about what's happening within a radio station or an ad agency or whatever. And it's important that confidentiality is absolutely respected as well. It's like a sacred space. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas when you're talking to a producer. But I think that nurturing of that relationship is absolutely invaluable.
So how do you nurture that kind of relationship when you're self-taping all the time and you're simply communicating by email with producers?
I think you really have to have good email skills. I think your email style has to reflect who you are as a person, because that email contact is crucial. When a lot of my clients now, I don't even speak to them. They send me a script, I record it, I package it off and send it to them. And we don't actually interact very much. So the relationship is sustained entirely on email. So your email skills have to be really good, professional, of course, but you do have to reflect who you are and be amenable and be flexible and make your producer's life easy. That's what it's about.
Making a producer's life easy is very important. And also, I don't think you should necessarily shy away from ignoring email and calling the producer.
Totally.
Sometimes when you've got pronunciation issues and things like that, it's almost impossible to do effectively on email anyway. So if you can find a good excuse to talk to them for real not face to face, but down the line or whatever, then take it.
one of you has an agent and the other one of you has never had an agent. How does that impact your work, and how essential is getting an agent? Because it's something, again, that a lot of newbies kind of come straight into a forum.
It's an aspiration for a lot of people.
A lot of them is an aspiration, but a lot of them will come into the forums and say, I'm just starting out as a voiceover. How do I get an agent? So how necessary is it? What kind of impact does it have?
I'll give you an opinion for what it's worth, and that is that as a starter, the chances are that you're not thoroughly experienced in voice work.
Totally.
And I think the answer is that an agent, at the moment, getting a voiceover agent is difficult because there are so many voiceovers and there is less and less work to go around for them through agents. So an agent is only going to take someone on who they think is exceptional.
Exactly.
Or particularly good at something. So in the early stages of a career, I think you should forget getting an agent.
Totally agree.
And look elsewhere to hone your skills. And when you are satisfied that you are the finished product, then if you want to get an agent because you don't have enough work or whatever, or you have aspirations to get better work, then that's the time to look for the agent.
Totally agree. And honestly, I would say it took me at least 4 years to feel competent. Reasonably competent doing this job.
It's taken me 46 and I'm still trying it.
It's hard though, isn't it, Brown? It's hard because every script you do, every session you do is different. Every client is different. There's always stuff to learn.
And if you are particularly demanding of yourself, you never really think you're expert anyway.
Totally that. I think for me, I just wanted to reach a level where I felt competent enough to handle clients in a session where they were really directing me in all sorts of really subtle ways, and I could cope with script changes and I could cope with timing changes and massively overwritten scripts, and I had to get it within a tenth of a second. And that, it was a lot. It was really a lot. And it took a long time to feel like I just had the basics in place. The basics. So I'm very wary, I have to say, of training organisations who promise people a voiceover career and who promise people that they will achieve excellence, because it doesn't exist. And it takes, in my experience, it takes a long time to learn how to do this job competently. And you're still always learning.
I think I put a caveat in there. We've been specifically talking about recording radio commercials. I can't speak from experience about agents in terms of gaming and all that sort of thing, because it's not my area of expertise. So whether the rules are slightly different for that, I'm not quite sure. But certainly for radio work or TV work and so on, then I think what you say is entirely right.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with Brown there, totally.
I'd certainly agree in terms of what you said about a promise that you will succeed, I think, in anything. There are so many variables, and being a voiceover full-time running it is not just speaking out loud, as we all know, it's the business behind it. I mean, in terms of, as a rough guesstimate, your time actually voicing and your time running a business, percentage-wise, have you any idea what that would be? I mean,
it depends on one little rule, and that is going back to developing your existing clients. Because if you can develop a stable of clients that give you repeat work,
exactly,
you don't need to spend much time looking for work.
Yes. Exactly.
That's the key. And it's, to me, rather than throwing a lot of shit at the wall to see if some of it sticks, and I'm thinking of Fiverr and the pay-to-play sites and so on and so forth, work much harder at specific individuals who you know have work to offer, and try and get them into a stable... You don't need many clients to be able to get sufficient repeat business to make a reasonable living. And I'm not talking that necessarily in radio. It could be anything, any voiceover task. If you've got 30 clients, for example, who come to you once a month or two, well, it doesn't take much in the way of mathematical knowledge to understand that can produce a steady income. So people who don't have that stable of clients are going to spend more time working on their business and self-promotion than people who do. So you can't answer the question as to how much you should spend, but you can say that once you've got regular clients, repeat clients, then the amount of time you spend on your business will become substantially less.
Yeah, totally agree with that. The other thing that I do, and I've done for many years now, I outsource the paperwork side of the business, the invoicing, the kind of admin I have an assistant who helps me with that, so that I can voice more. I can focus more on generating revenue for the business as well, and I give somebody else those tasks that I'm not so great at.
I think there's another trick there, that the expectation that you're going to make a lot of money as a voiceover is now far less.
Oh, totally.
Of a possibility than it was 30 years ago.
Even 5 years ago.
Well, that's absolutely true. Back in the day when you were just doing radio ads, because you were travelling around the country, you would be making appointments with radio stations where you would go maybe every 3 or 4 months because it's a long way away. You'd be making those bookings a year in advance. You'd be putting 3 monthly bookings in. So you knew as a voiceover what you'd be doing up to a year ahead. Now you don't know what you're doing this afternoon. And as more and more people come into the industry and AI looms on the horizon, I think the important thing is that you shouldn't expect to be able to use voiceover as your sole source of income. If you're a startup, particularly, the chances of you making a living out of voiceover alone are becoming vanishingly slim. So therefore, the business about how long you spend on your business is an even more pertinent question, because you have to decide, well, if I need other eggs in my basket and only one of those eggs is voiceover work, what proportion of my working day does that take, and what proportion of that proportion do I spend working on developing that business? It's not an easy calculation.
With that in mind, then, if you had 1 or 2 top tips to give people that are either newer, not necessarily looking to start, but newer in the VO industry, what words of wisdom would you pass on?
I think
practice, self-promotion, and realistic expectations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's practice, self-promotion within an appropriate level as well. Don't be kind of, all over the place, jazz hands when you haven't got the experience to back it up. But also listen, really listen to your own voice, and listen critically to your own voice, and listen to others, listen to other show reels, listen to the styles and changing fashions that are inevitably occurring across all sorts of different types of media, and just be honest with yourself as well. Be self-critical, be honest, and adapt. Always adapt, always change, always be curious, and have a beginner's mindset, I think.
There's no harm in being ambitious. You just have to be realistic at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Okay, I think one last question then, because we've got so much that we can use on that. So thank you very much for joining us. If you were going to do it all again, what would you do the same and what would you do different?
I don't think I'd do anything different. It's been great.
I would do so. If I was starting now.
Oh, if I was starting now. Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're asking? If you're starting now?
Well, not necessarily.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I would agree with them. And then in that case, if I was starting again when I did start, I don't think I would change very much. No.
Okay. And what would you change if you were starting now?
Well, I wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it. Totally that.
Wow.
Totally that. I wouldn't entertain it. Honestly.
Because it's only going to be a gig economy thing in future. So you've got to have other skills as well. That's my view. It might sound harsh, but I firmly believe that.
Totally agree with Brown. I think it's going to be bitty, unreliable. I don't think there's going to be enough space for people to develop enough skills as well.
I think it still could be a lot of fun, but I just don't think you can rely on it as an entire income. I think it's going to be a gig economy thing, and that's why I probably wouldn't do it if I was starting now, personally.
I wouldn't either. I think that the future of advertising is going to change a lot with dynamic advertising and with AI voices, and I think people will select the voices that they want to hear on commercials, and a lot of it will be AI, and I don't think it's a viable career.
No, I mean, there's a lot of noise being made about AI at the moment, but it's literally only the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
But it's not just AI. It's just that there's so many people doing the stuff, prices. The trouble is, with so many people doing the work, the value of the work is getting lower and lower and lower, so you have to do more and more. You have to run like hell to stand still. So the only thing I would do, if I was starting now, I'd have another job as well.
Yeah, totally. don't rely on this full time.
A reliable second job to make it affordable to do voiceover, I think.
Yeah. I like that neither of you would change anything if you started back again in the same place, though. That's ace.
We've done really well out of it. I think the both of us have. It's
really
been
well.
Tremendous. Yeah.
Really well. It's been a fantastic... And it still is, it still is. I'm grateful literally every day. Literally every day I'm grateful for all the work that comes in and the relationships that I still have and the new relationships that come on board. I'm grateful every single day. I really am. But it's been a lot of fun. It still is.
That's so cool.
You've been listening to the Voiceover Social podcast, hosted by Rob B and Helen B from BEE.
Sponsored by BEE.
Voiceover Social. Thank you to our guests.
Paul Brown, elderly voiceover.
And Emma Clarke, emmaclarke.com.
The Voiceover Social.
Socials coming up are London Social on the 3rd of July, Online Social, The Pint and Rabbit on 19th of July, Berlin Social on the 27th of July, Bath Social on the 23rd of August, Belfast Social on the 24th of August, Birmingham Social 7th of September, and Manchester Social on the 28th of September. All details are on the website, thevosocial.com/events.
All audio production by Rob B.
Please like, subscribe and leave a review to help more voiceover people find us.
And if you want to email us, it's listen@thevosocial.com.
See you next month.
The Voiceover Social.